Hello, I'm Matthew Mile Gray and I'm welcoming you to the channel. Thank you for being here. Thought I would just open with my usual disclaimer. Please approach this presentation with essential critical thinking, thesis, with antithesis for synthesis, and a healthy skepticism. So the subject under discussion today was a question that was sent in regarding the lawyer that was defending Watchtower in Norway, the Supreme Court, where there was the state versus Jehovah's Witnesses in February, early February. Of course, at the time of this video, we are still awaiting a final outcome or a decision or ruling from the judges or from the Supreme Court. Some are just going, well, irrespective of whatever happens in that court, there are some interesting things to ponder. So the question that I was sent in was, is Anders Risdal, and I'll spell it out just for the recognition software in the transcript, Anders Rysssdal. So I sometimes say Risdal, or it should be Risdal. So is Anders Risdal the JW Eternity? Is he actually a baptized Jehovah's Witness? And I thought that was a very good question, because Jehovah's Witnesses also use third parties to defend them. They might not necessarily use a Jesus Christ figure, or they might not use an Apostle Paul figure who is, you could say, immersed in their faith. So when I looked into it, and you can perhaps put things in the comments for those that know some more about this, I could not find any credible public information from reliable sources that says that Anders Christian Stray Risdal, the Norwegian lawyer representing Jehovah's Witnesses in the court, or their court case against the Norwegian state, is himself a baptized Jehovah's Witness. So maybe some find that interesting that this would be the case. Sources about him describe him strictly as a professional Norwegian attorney and partner at a law firm, Glittertind, with no mention of his, or is it Glittertind? Glittertind. With no mention of his personal religious affiliation. So yes, I must get the pronunciation right. Sorry if I've butchered that. But yes, he's a Norwegian lawyer and partner at Advocacy.
Glittertind.
Glittertind. With decades of legal experience. And of course, he's represented many clients in important cases, including Jehovah's Witnesses. So there's no authoritative reporting or official biographical info stating that he is a member of Jehovah's Witnesses or that he's been baptized into the JW faith. You can find online discussions like forums, Reddit, and there's some speculation that he likely isn't a Jehovah's Witness believer and is simply just hired as legal counsel. But these are unverified opinions. So we said, yes, also, have healthy skepticism about this. We don't have reliable evidence about that. But it would seem that based on available credible information, he's a secular lawyer and not known publicly to be a baptized Jehovah's Witness. Of course, there are those that have been following this a lot longer. They know of him. They've come across him, been observing him for a long time. I've also observed him before this particular time, and I had no reason to believe that he was actually a confirmed Jehovah's Witness or baptized. I don't find there's any evidence of that. But it raises another question. What about Philip Brumley? Ever heard of him? Well, he's been in oversight positions within Jehovah's Witnesses, and within Jehovah's Witnesses' own official literature, Philip Brumley, Philip, Philip Brumley, Brumley, is a member of Jehovah's Witnesses. So I thought it would be interesting just to bring Philip into the picture, because in his particular case, he has spent his life in service within the organization's legal department. So, yes, Watchtower has done a biography of Philip. So there's an article on him that has been floating around, and Brumley there describes joining Jehovah's Witnesses, the Bethel service, and later being assigned to the legal department at World Headquarters. And then studying law. Was he in carpentry or something like that, or paint shop? Whatever it was. He was asked to study law and became overseer on the legal work. And so, yeah, you could say he had has a lifelong Jehovah's Witness career. So this strongly suggests that he's not just a secular lawyer hired by the organization, but he was somebody that was trained by Jehovah's Witnesses, deeply involved within Jehovah's Witnesses. He's likely signed contracts, non-disclosure. For decades, he's been bound to this assignment and to Jehovah's Witnesses, and appears to be currently a believing, baptized member, or if you want to say associate, since Bethel service and legal department positions are typically held by baptized witnesses. So yeah, we realize that there's no independent authoritative source like a court filing or outside biography that explicitly states he is baptized as Jehovah's Witness. We've got videos and biographies from the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses that say that, but the most publicly accessible information about him comes from Jehovah's Witnesses' own publications. The fact that he has appeared on these in these courts, yeah, you can say that maybe I'm splitting hairs, but yes, he would be counted as a lawyer. He would be counted as a Jehovah's Witness, and you could say that that is the case. Of course, you can always argue things, which is what we've learned in the court legal speak. But it's reasonable to conclude by outside sources and legal reporting focus on his actual role as general counsel for Jehovah's Witnesses, and might not comment on his personal religious membership, but yes, I would say safely he's a Jehovah's Witness. You could argue against it, but yes, I believe so. In the religion, I always regarded him as Jehovah's Witness. So from the organization's official profile of him, yes, you could say that he's a long time practicing Jehovah's Witness, tied into the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, and not just an outside attorney. So it makes it very likely that he's baptized. I've regarded him as a member, you can say associate, yes, splitting hairs, of the religion, although there's no independent public document that explicitly confirms his baptism. So the reason why these questions come up is when someone like Philip Brumley uses advocacy and legal speak in the same patterns as Anders Risdal, okay, the question came up: was he ever found? This is Brumley, that is. Was Brumley ever found to by legal peers or the legal system to have crossed from advocacy, which allows misleading and reframing through semantics, to actual lying. Because we still hear this thing of, no, Matt, that's advocacy, it's lying. It's just lying. This is what we're going to get into. So there has been formal legal findings against Philip Brumley by a US federal court that goes beyond ordinary advocacy and into sanctionable behavior because of how he presented the facts to the court. Now, this is what's on the public legal record, right? You've got sanctions by the federal court. So in the Rowland, ROWLAND versus Watchtower litigation in the U.S. District Court of Montana, Judge Susan Watters, Watters, found that Brumley's sworn affidavit contained misleading statements about the role of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, known in short or in abbreviated WTPA. WTPA. So that's Watchtower Bible Tract Society of Pennsylvania when you see WTPA. And yeah, they said that that affidavit was having misleading statements about the role of Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, WTPA, in its congregations. Now, this is important because the court concluded that his presentation demonstrated at least a reckless disregard for providing an accurate and truthful accounting of key facts relevant to jurisdiction. Now, because of that, the judge sanctioned him personally under, okay, I must get my glasses, but it's under 28 USC section paragraph or legal section paragraph 1927. Let me just check that. Yeah, 28 USC legal section paragraph 1927 or 1927. So it's a statute lawyers, where it says a statute lawyers can be held to when they unreasonable and vexatiously multiply proceedings, which can happen when an attorney files or pursues arguments that are materially misleading. So what were the fines that were imposed? Well, you might know this already. Many that come onto the channel, they've already got an awareness. Maybe some are also learning or feeling their way. And the person who asked me the question, they are feeling their way through this. They've been checking things out and they're going, Matt, what's going on here? And I say, yeah, in this particular case, Brumley was ordered to pay more than 154,000 US dollars in excess legal costs, expenses, and fees to the opposing parties as a result of this conduct. So yeah, there was an appeal, but it upheld the sanctions. So he appeals the sanctions, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit affirmed the sanctions. So he checked it out, and it means that a higher court agreed that the lower court was justified in holding him responsible. So what does this mean legally? Why look into this? Because the U.S. federal practice sanctions under, what does we say, section paragraph, legal section paragraph 1927 are not imposed lightly. They require a finding that an attorney's conduct went beyond normal zealous advocacy and recklessly or intentionally multiplied proceedings by misleading the court. So being sanctioned doesn't automatically mean, oh, Brumley was guilty of criminal lying. Let's get this right. But it does mean that a federal judge found his sworn legal statements were not sufficiently accurate or responsibly prepared under the rules governing officers of the court. So, what's the context? Well, all lawyers must balance advocacy for their clients with the duty to the court to be truthful. I call it a truth wave. But in court, you know, they have this duty to be truthful and to investigate their factual assertions within the rules. So, yeah, many persons who are not used to the jurisprudence, science of law, they come in and outright and say, this is a lie. This is a lie. Courts work very, very different. But a sanction for disregard, reckless, we said reckless, yeah. Yeah. Reckless disregard indicates that at least in this case, the court determined that he crossed the line in preparing and submitting his affidavit. So, some say, well, Matt, okay, splitting hairs again. What was the precise point of failure that Philip Brumley made, and why does he deserve sanctions that were prescribed? Wasn't he merely doing his job to defend the Institute, just like third-party unders, Risdal? So let's see if we can get a clear explanation of what the courts actually found in the sanctions against Philip Brumley, and why the judge concluded that the sanctions were appropriate under US federal law. We've got Norway over here, we've got the US over here. Okay? So what did Brumley actually do? What did he do in the trial? So in the Rowland versus Watchtower case in United States Federal Court in Montana, Brumley signed and filed a sworn affidavit on behalf of Watchtower and Bible Tract Society of Pennsylvania, WTPA, if you see that, WTPA. In that affidavit, he said in present tense things like, oh, WTPA has no contact with congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses located in Montana. So it was a distancing thing, right? So WTPA does not establish or disseminate policy or procedure to congregations in Montana. I'm not claiming that. That was what he put. He also put something like WTPA does not appoint or remove elders, ministerial servants, or publishers in Montana. Right? So these kind of statements, and yes, I have paraphrased, but these statements, these kind of statements were used as the sole evidentiary support for WTPA's motion to dismiss the case for lack of personal jurisdiction. Now, why, oh why, did the court sanction him? The judge found, and this is why, you know, in some videos past, I've talked about evidence or not evidence. When it now comes to the stage where a judge makes the finding, whatever you have accumulated that might be called non-evidence now becomes a finding where a judge has ruled. And the judge found that this was reckless or misleading statements. So up until that point, there's all of this paperwork that's accumulating, and you say, well, this isn't evidence of anything going wrong. No lying. It's just advocacy. And person's going, no, this is a lie. This is a lie. When it comes to the judge, now, all of those documents now pile up and a ruling is made. And so the statements were made in ways that the judge says didn't accurately reflect the real historical facts about WTPA's involvement with congregations in Montana. during the relevant time periods between the 1970s and 1980s. We're getting an idea of the time period. I'll tell you why I've taken a breath. Because plaintiffs brought forward other evidence. Remember we talked about non-evidence and evidence? Well, now it gets to this stage. Because they bring forward other evidence that made it unclear or unlikely that WTPA's assertions were completely true. The court concluded Brumley did not adequately investigate or clarify those assertions before submitting them under oath. And so because of that, the affidavit led to 17 months of unnecessary litigation, including discovery fights, motions, that would not have been needed if the jurisdiction issue had been accurately framed initially. So sanctions under the 28 USC legal document section paragraph 1927, that statute that's used. It allows a federal court to sanction a lawyer who unreasonably and vexatiously multiplies proceedings, meaning that an attorney's conduct significantly and improperly increases the time, it increases the expense required by the court and the opposing parties. I'm going to add, what does that do for justice? What does it do for a system like Enron, for instance, that operates for 10 years before, bam, comes crashing down? What does it do for somebody that's involved with politicians who is essentially using blackmail to control everybody who's controlling everybody? You know, some of these persons, they do atrocious things, and they only get put into prison after about 14 years. Can you think of anybody like that? So this time delay, it's very, very important. Very, very important. Because yes, it's time, it's expense. And that's how we quantify, in human terms, the cost for somebody who has faced abuse or somebody that is trying to find justice. So the judge here concluded that Brumley's conduct met that standard because his affidavit served as the foundational factual document for the jurisdiction fight. The affidavit contained the statements that turned out to be inaccurate, misleading, or made without sufficient investigation, and that resulted in the months of extra litigation. That resulted in the extra expense that wasted both parties and the court's time. So the appeals court affirmed. Brumley, there he is, appealing, arguing that because he wasn't counsel of record, you could say a technicality, in that court, that paragraph section 1927 shouldn't apply to him. Now, the Ninth Circuit rejected that claim, noting, Brumley, you're an attorney. You're admitted to practice in the U.S. courts, and that signing affidavits in a legal dispute counts as acting as an attorney for purposes of sanction law. So the appellate panel therefore upheld the sanctions. That's what the appellate panel did. So this idea of, well, he was just doing his job. Matt, wasn't he just doing his job? You know, in ordinary advocacy, lawyers are expected to defend their clients' legal interests. But United States courts impose professional duties on all attorneys who submit evidence or legal documents, including a duty of candor under oath. That's truthfulness in sworn statements. That's what an affidavit is. So, a duty to investigate factual assertions before presenting them, and a duty not to recklessly ignore known or easily discoverable evidence that contradicts what's being sworn to the court. So even lawyers defending their organizations must meet those baseline duties. Yes, the sanctions were imposed, not because he defended his client, but because the court found his factual assertions under oath were made without sufficient fact-checking and caused this unnecessary procedural delay and expense. Are we getting an idea of the patterns here? Does it seem very, very familiar? Because I'm going to propose that, in summary, Brumley signed an affidavit that became the core basis for a motion to dismiss. And the court found his statements were not accurate and were presented without adequate investigation. So this led to the 17 months of extra litigation that could have been avoided. And so under the federal sanctions law, section paragraph 1927, the court held him personally responsible for that unnecessary multiplication of proceedings. And the Ninth Circuit upheld the sanctions. So, why are these questions coming up? Why are a person saying to me, Matt, what? How? When? How does this all work? Why? Because it leads to this one. Could, unders, Risdal, whatever happens in the Supreme Court here, we're still awaiting at this stage, but we're proposing for the future. Could unders, Risdal, face similar for the way that he presented to the Supreme Court his case, which many who seek justice publicly and have been outspoken. And you could say, look, they're not trained in legal speak, but they're just coming in and they saying, Matt, you really have to get it in your head. Yes, we understand that in legal proceedings, things are different, but Matt, he crossed the line from advocacy to lying. And I go, well, did he? In legal speak, I would need to see very, very clearly, and we are premature for public transcripts until the Supreme Court makes its ruling. We need to respect this. Right? So even if you've got personal notes, yeah, you could frame them as personal notes, but I suggest be careful. Be careful. So yeah, look, this thing about lying, this thing about advocacy, it's hard to defend in public opinion. And public opinion versus how a Supreme Court works, yes, it does count. It does count, especially if now, from a spiritual belief system where we talk about Matthew 18:15 to 35, that's been exhausted, and now you've got a religion that by that own teaching, that own biblical reference for saying, oh, well, for years, this is how we've done things. Matthew 18, 15 to 35, get it in your heads, two witness rule. When they plug this, when this has been plugged for so long, it's got to stand by its own rule. It's got to stand by its own principle. Or it, as we are seeing, it's collapsing because it is the most misapplied set of scriptures you've ever come across. I'm going to suggest that. Have I got it right? So, public opinion and legal standards, they're very different things, okay, especially in appellate courts. So, here's how it applies to Anders Risdal and whether he could realistically face sanctions. So, we'll just have to see, because what courts actually punish for a lawyer to be sanctioned by a court, like in the Supreme Court of Norway, judges must usually find one of the following specific violations, and I've got about 5 of them. You ready? 1. Knowingly false factual statements. 2. Fabricated evidence. 3. Intentional misrepresentation of law or precedent. 4. Bad faith procedural conduct. And 5. Failure to correct a statement known to be false. So now look. Legal systems generally do not punish arguments just because they sound misleading to outsiders. Let's get this real straight. Because advocacy allows selective emphasis, and it allows strategic framing, and it allows interpretation of ambiguous facts and arguing contested legal theory. So that is considered normal parts of litigation. Now, why public perception often differs. So non-lawyers and often judge, you could say, yeah, persons who haven't been trained in jurisprudence or the legal system or the science of law, non-lawyers, okay, often judge statements by everyday conversational standards. Okay, this is where I've got into trouble. This is where I've got into trouble with family, because they say, Matt, we don't want a circuit overseer living with us. We don't want a JW, what is it, organization man, company man living with us. It's just driving us crazy. You know, get out of this. And I'm going, well, this has been my whole life. This has been special pioneering days. This has been, you know, my career that isn't a career. Okay. Yeah, but look, everyday conversational standards, it doesn't tally. But court judges, court lawyers, the court system looks at somebody like Anders, or it looks at these statements in the court proceedings by technical legal standards. So you can say they are stricter in some ways, but also more permissive in others. Does that sound like a contradiction? So look, what sounds like lying to a lay audience, if I may say that, may legally be an argument about interpretation, or it might be a dispute over definitions, like the shunning. Oh, it doesn't appear in Norway language. You know, there isn't an exact equivalent. Is that true? Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, you could say that's true. But then if they are linked to Watchtower and Bible Tract Society in the United States, they use English. You can even see in the Norway court that they did break into English now and then. So, what? There is no word? Well, we saw it appear in the 2013 revised translation of the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures, or the Bible, the Silver Sword, which is the Bible that Jehovah's Witnesses use, which is the English foundation for translating into all the other languages. So without it, you can't have the Norwegian Watchtower, you can't have the Norwegian instructions that are disseminated through the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. So yeah, it's very tricky. But what sounds like lying, just to recap, is legally likely to be just an argument over interpretation. That's the one thing. A dispute over definitions, or 3, reliance on a narrow legal distinction. So courts, look, they expect opposing counsel to challenge questionable claims. Otherwise, how would they do it? I've had persons who are used in defense. They've told me, Matt, we're driven by ethics. I don't break the law to defend somebody. I go in with the view of saying, let's get the story out there. And I look at that and I admire it. because I go, okay, at least that is the way to heal things. But I also think that those kind of persons that are working in the legal system, that are sharing with me those kind of things, they're very honorable people. Okay. And just like any other system, it's made up of a mixture. It's made up of a mixture and a broad spectrum of different personalities. So, look. Courts expect opposing counsel to challenge the questionable claims. I've said that. But the system assumes that truth emerges through adversarial testing. That's the point. Not through one lawyer's neutrality. So you have to have the adversarial testing. Remember, I say, even in these discussions, have the thesis, have the antithesis, and come about with a convergence to make synthesis. It's these two things coming together, but to have the healthy skepticism. Question, Matt, I want to know if Anders Risdal can be sanctioned. Okay, here's the answer. Yes. Oh, Matt, what are you saying? Are you reversing what you've just said here? We thought you were on Anders' side here. We thought you were on the side of Jehovah's Witness organization. Let's get something really straight. I may be a witness to what goes on, and I may be called to testify, and I have been called to testify. Right? But I do not support an illegal action. I do not support a liability that's creating harm. I've said no. I've been living that life for years. This isn't just a sudden change. Oh, Matt, you've repented and you've dug your heels in. No, I was sent to the bush and sent to awful assignments because I don't fit in personality-wise or ethically. Never have. Okay. So I've said yes, Risdal could be sanctioned, but only if the judges themselves conclude that he violated professional duties. Now, what does that require? It requires a formal complaint, judicial findings, because remember, evidence isn't evidence until it's tested, right, in official ways. So you've got to have judicial findings that are on the record. That's what it is. So all of this paperwork, evidence, it might be accumulating, and depositions may be accumulating, but only until judicial findings are on the record can you do something. So another thing that would be needed is a ruling that his conduct has crossed from advocacy into misconduct. The court might just say, no, he did his job. Leave him alone. But if the court has not issued such a finding, we need to realize something very, very important. That legally speaking, of course, he's not crossed the line. Regardless of public criticism, regardless of what we hear, a person saying, Matt, he lied. Matt, he lied, for crying out loud. He lied. I'm going to repeat this. If a court has not issued such a finding that he crossed from advocacy into misconduct, legally speaking, he's not crossed the line. Regardless of public criticism, so let's just talk about why sanctions are rare at Supreme Court level. Because sanctions against senior appellate advocates are uncommon. There's good reasons for that, because arguments are heavily documented and they're reviewed. Justices can question lawyers live. We saw that happen in Norway Supreme Court. And written submissions are scrutinized by clerks. They look at it. They can usually pick up, what's this? What's this small print? And believe me when I say, within Jehovah's Witnesses, I have seen insertions of very small print, that's done deliberately to favor the person that's inserted it. So clerks, they do look for these things. And your opposing counsel immediately challenges inaccuracies. That's their training. So if something is clearly false, judges usually address it directly during the proceedings. So what's the bottom line, folks? Yes. Again, I empathize, because people may sincerely feel in their heart of hearts that a lawyer's presentation was misleading. But only the court can determine misconduct. So unless judges formally rule that a lawyer made knowingly false statements or acted in bad faith, the legal system treats their conduct as legitimate. It's advocacy. It's not lying. Right? So somebody says to me, Matt, take Jesus Christ in a court setting. Take Jesus Christ of the Bible. Look at the Apostle Paul. Look at his way, Paul's way of defending beliefs as truth, and compare that to modern day Anders Risdal, who is Jehovah's Witnesses' chosen representative. Of all the people that they've got, of all the millions, they could pull out special pioneers, missionaries, mature people that have got years behind them and records behind them. Why, oh why could they not pull out from the superior training, the most superior education the planet has ever seen? Why couldn't they pick out ones greater than Brumley? Why couldn't they have your modern Jesus Christ? I mean, we've got Christ brothers, we've got them. That would be ones that you could say are like your modern day parallel to the apostles, right? There's got to be Pauls out there. There's got to be those with those kind of minds that have worked from the bottom up, that haven't just been thrust into this, but they've got the experience behind them. They've got the clout because they've been the pioneer. They've been cleaning the bathrooms. They've been shoveling the dirt. They've survived. They've grown their own crops. They've had near-death experiences. They can speak with conviction about defending the vulnerable. Don't we have that? Can we compare what's happening in modern times to Jesus Christ and the Apostle Paul? Please. Why does Jehovah's Witnesses choose a third party outsider who we say was just doing his job? It can be said, as a third party, cannot be expected to act as a true Jehovah's Witness. He's hired. We sense that they've done this third party thing with Anders and many others. They've done this because we think that they could claim, well, you can't expect this person to act as a true Jehovah's Witness, which is the way that they would try and distance themselves ethically when their own doctrine is shown to them to have been crossed. In other words, they could eject Anders. You're fired. No. He was a third party. He was incompetent. You think that Jehovah's Witnesses can't do that? Anders Risdal, take note. Take note. Because just because you're not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you think that the power of this religion, this international organization that says it is going to dominate every government on the planet, you think it can't do this? But we're comparing to Christ. We're comparing to Paul in advocacy. Would Christ and Paul mislead sincere people, mind you, who are seeking justice and who are obeying their human Jehovah's Witness leaders because they're told this is God's hand, this is His Spirit that's guiding them? And when it comes to double bind directives, where every which way they go, they're punished, how would Christ and how would Paul, the Apostle, deal with this? I hope that this is a thoughtful and I realize it's complex, but I hope it's thoughtful to compare in this way, because I'm really asking about three different frameworks of truth and responsibility. I'm asking about the prophetic moral teaching that Jesus and Paul had, and we've got to separate from legal advocacy, that's modern lawyers, and we've got to separate from institutional religious accountability, which is organizational behavior, because they operate by very different rules, all three of them. So let's look at it carefully and let's look at it fairly. Yes, I do have notes, so let me stick with that to try and keep coherent. So here's number one, your prophetic advocacy versus legal advocacy with Jesus Christ and Paul the Apostle. So in your New Testament, okay, Matthew to Revelation, in that narrative, Paul and Christ are presented as witnesses to truth. That's why I say I'm always a witness. Okay, because I've witnessed what's going on. I am playing on words. But Paul and Christ present themselves as witnesses to the truth, not representatives hired to defend a client. It's a very different dynamic. Now, they explicitly condemn deception. We're going to come into spiritual warfare later. Just keep that with a pin in the board for now. Okay. So Jesus says, like at Matthew 5:37, let your yes mean yes. Your no mean no. Don't go beyond that. Paul says, we have renounced secret and shameful ways. We do not use deception. Really, Matt, where is that? 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verses 2. So their authority, their claim, it's moral, it's divine, it's not institutional or contractual. So they are therefore portrayed as bound to absolute truthfulness. I call it the truth wave. Even when it harms them socially or legally. So in fact, their willingness to suffer rather than adjust statements is part of how the text present their credibility. So in biblical terms, misleading even strategically would contradict their stated mission. Hold on about spiritual warfare, because you're going, Matt, there's accounts in the Bible of deception. Hold on. Coming back to Anders Risdal. So here we have a modern attorney, looks like he's hired, operates under a completely different ethical system. He's obligated to advocate for a client's legal interest. He's doing his job. He must not knowingly lie or present false evidence. But he may frame facts favorably. He may argue interpretations. He may emphasize helpful points and minimize damaging ones. In my opinion, I feel he did that. Yes, this thing about the deception thing, did it cross my mind? Sure. And I'm still examining it. This is a work in progress. I'm still examining this thing. I'm not conclusive. So what Anders did isn't considered deception in law. It's considered the adversarial system functioning as designed. So legally speaking, a lawyer is not a truth proclaimer. He's a client representative within procedural rules. Now, why do organizations use outside control? Sorry. Why do organizations use outside counsel? That's what I want to say. Why do they use outside counsel? Because when a religious body hires outside counsel, which Jehovah's Witnesses and most institutions do, it's usually for practical reasons. So they get the expertise in a specific legal system. They go, oh, Matt, we kept you in the bush out there. We need to hire somebody. You haven't got the skills. But you told me this is the best education I could ever have. Yeah. Let's hire the skills over here. And I've heard branch committees do that. They go, what skill do you have? I was a pioneer. You proudly say, I've been a pioneer. 25 years or more. And they go, we'll stick with him, thanks. Here you go. There's the plunger. There's a bathroom to go sort out. Yeah. So the practical reasons is they need expertise in a specific legal system. This thing about, you've got an undergraduate degree if you've been reading Watchtowers. Yeah, in a way that's true if you've worked hard at it to see behind what's actually going on. But the organization, it needs credibility in court. So to bring Matt Gray from the bush, forget it. That's not going to do it. They need somebody who's got procedural familiarity. If Matt Gray gets in there and says, "No, I'll defend this," oh, I'm going to say it's unlikely you've got the skill, Matt Gray. Really, really. So this reason why organizations do this, it creates a perceived ethical distance because the lawyer speaks for the organization, but it's not morally accountable as the organization. It's very, very useful. That's why they can hire defense agents to even harass people on the internet, because you go, oh, well, how can you do this? They go, no, we didn't do that. Oh, did you trace something towards us? Oh, no, that was just our defense company that did that. They're not even Jehovah's Witnesses. We just told them to defend us. Better take it up with them. So that's the distance, the ethical distance that they create. And it can feel troubling because to observers, especially if the legal arguments sound different from internal teachings, you're going, what is going on? Or it appears strategically framed rather than transparent. You go, man, I thought we're truthful here. I tell them about my private thoughts, things of an intimate nature. I tell them all these. I even tell them if, I saw somebody and I was somehow titillated by this. I commend you for your honesty. I commend you for your candidness. But in law, there's a separation. And JW knows this. The top tiers know this. And it's standard. And it's expected. It's not unusual or suspicious by itself. Because, we've got to understand the core difference in standards. The question that hinges on a real tension here. Because you've got a prophetic model. Jesus Christ, Apostle Paul, absolute truth-telling. The legal model is permissible strategic framing. Your prophetic model, moral witness. In your legal model, it's client advocate. Back to your prophecy or your prophetic model. Excuse me, you can say is accountable to God. And in your legal model, accountable to court rules. So they're not the same role. It can't be judged by identical criteria. So your key insight when you're talking about Jesus or Paul, the apostle, okay, they were acting as biblical teachers. Their own writings, they suggest they would refuse to mislead, even if it cost them their case. Right? Well, of course, you can argue this, but yeah, on the surface level, that is what it is. A modern attorney is not claiming prophetic authority. It's only professional representation. So your courts judge him by legal ethic, not spiritual ideals, which we, if you've been in the JW system, have been saturated by, programmed by. Okay? Matt, what's the balanced conclusion? Here it is. Okay, here's the attempt. it's understandable that some observers feel tension when legal advocacy sounds different from religious moral language, the religious experience. But legally speaking, unless a court finds misconduct, the court finds it, okay? A lawyer's duty is fulfilled. Anders Risdal, you've done your job. You've represented your client within the rules, not by embodying the moral standard of the religion that you represent. So, here's another question. Didn't Jehovah of Jehovah's Witness scripture send a deceptive spirit to fool Ahab? Isn't that what spiritual warfare is all about? Oh, here's another one, Matt. Didn't a prostitute get rewarded by God for deceiving concerning 2 spies at Jericho? Which God is this? Is this Freemason Jehovah? Is this Jehovah's Witness Jehovah? Is it the same Jehovah? Is it this duality Jehovah? What is this? What's going on? Is this Jehovah? Who are we talking about here? Which God is this that's used to support spiritual warfare deception that Jehovah's Witnesses are using? Hang on. Rahab's a prostitute. Before she was saved, before she became part of the religious system, wouldn't that be a stoning violation? What's going on here? So yes, I acknowledge that these are very real passages that have challenged readers for centuries. So to understand them fairly, we've got to just look at what the texts actually say and how different traditions interpret them, and whether they truly support the idea that God endorses deception as a religious tactic. Okay. So, the deceptive spirit sent to Ahab. So if you're thinking 1 Kings 22 or 2 Chronicles 18, that's where we're coming from. Because in the vision described by the prophet Micaiah, God permits a spirit to become a lying spirit in the mouths of Ahab's prophets. Now, what's that about? The purpose is judgment on Ahab, who is already portrayed as persistently wicked and resistant to truth. This is not a loyal elder in the congregation, loyal pioneer, loyal associate. No. Very different. Okay? So this thing about spiritual warfare, when I get hit with it by somebody that I trust, I go, why are you bringing spiritual warfare to your own people? To people who have defended you with their lives. And you're using spiritual warfare. So let's get the context correct that most scholars note. Because the passage is framed as a heavenly court vision. Oh yeah. So it's symbolic courtroom imagery. You could say it's like a dream. So God is not depicted as lying directly. You know, how can he if it's a dream? But you could say, no, but Matt, this is the real spiritual realm. Okay. So even there, God isn't depicted as lying directly, but he allows. They say Jehovah allows, or God allows certain things to happen. And in this case, he allows Ahab to follow deception he already prefers. So Micaiah openly tells Ahab the truth beforehand. Got that? Yeah. Ahab is not actually deprived of the truthful warning. So the theological interpretation in mainstream scholarship is the story about divine judgment and human stubbornness, not a general approval of religious deception. So when I go to, say, for instance, a coordinator of a branch and I say, oh, this is happening, and he denies it, he lies to my face, or uses legal framing to my face to just shut it down. Okay, and you can say, well, Matt, has he technically lied? Has he? Has he? I go, well, where was the truth wave? I say the truth wave. Where was he telling me beforehand what the real story was? Okay, let's move along to Rahab. Rahab and the spies at Jericho, because that's the other reference about deception. Because Rahab becomes this ancestress of Jesus Christ. There's the reward. In Joshua 2, Rahab hides Israelite spies and lies to the city authorities to protect them. Oh, they went over there, but they're over here. Now, you fast forward to Hebrews chapter 11, verses 31. Okay? And you compare it to Joshua 2. In Hebrews chapter 11, verses 31, it praises Rahab's faith. Her faith. It praises her faith. James chapter 2, 25 praises her actions. So let's zoom in on what this is. Because the Bible praises her faith and her loyalty, not the lie itself, not prostitution. Have we got the distinction? So most Jewish and Christian commentators explain it this way. She acted with the limited moral understanding she had at the time. The narrative describes what she did, but does not explicitly command believers to imitate her deception. So our coordinator that's using this similar advocacy thing, or if you want to say outright lying to my face, going, oh no, this problem doesn't exist. What are you talking about? No, that's not evidence. No. I'm confused. I don't understand what you're talking about, Matt. What are you talking about? That there's this problem? No. I go, this is contrary to the coordinator who trained me. I can compare to other coordinators and I go, geez, you are totally different. You are totally different to this coordinator. Really. I could have freeness of speech with this one. I could share all this. What are you an active prostitute now? Is that what it is? Oh, you want to be like Ahab? Okay. So we're getting to see that no, this is not what the Bible is doing here. Yeah. So the narrative is showing this is not an explicit command telling believers to imitate her deception, telling coordinators to do the same, or branch committee members or elders or sisters, the so-called mature ones, the super sweet ones that are coming forward to defend on these liabilities through very similar ways to like what happens in this court system. The case of Rahab, her inclusion in later biblical passages being praised, it's focusing on her allegiance, it's focusing on her courage, not her method. So was Rahab liable to execution under later Israelite law? Is that what happens? No. Because the Mosaic law, okay, all right, contains strict sexual morality penalties. But two clarifications matter. Rahab lived in a Canaanite society before joining Israel. And biblical law did not retroactively punish people for acts committed before joining the covenant community. Okay? So in fact, the narrative emphasizes her integration and acceptance, not punishment. And you can look at something like Joshua chapter 6, verses 25 for that. So does the Bible teach religious deception as a strategy? So across full biblical text, the dominant pattern is actually the very opposite. Truthfulness is repeatedly commanded. False witness is condemned. And God is described as not lying. Look at Numbers chapter 23 verses 19, or look at Titus chapter 1 verses 2. These stories, Rahab, what's the other one? Ahab and Rahab. Ahab and Rahab. These two stories that we're mentioning, or that get cited, are exceptional narrative episodes, not general instructions. So scholars, they typically distinguish between a narrative description of what happened and a moral command, what believers should do. Not everything described in Scripture is presented as a moral to imitate. You can think about birthdays, for instance. There is no explicit Scripture saying, oh no, don't do this. But what Jehovah's Witnesses do is they take these stories and then they make it fit whatever your leadership is trying to swing at the particular time. So different religions interpret those passages differently. Some groups have historically discussed concepts like, well, withholding information from persecutors. But I'm going to say not from your own people, okay? Or strategic silence in hostile settings. I'm going to say not from your own people. But even within those traditions, there's debate about limits and ethics. Interpretations aren't always uniform, and critics openly or often discuss, or maybe we should say dispute, and perhaps even quite aggressively, how these texts are applied. So, Matt, what's the big picture? Here's the attempt. The Bible contains complex stories where deception appears in the narrative, but they occur in specific contexts: war, judgment, survival, and they're rarely framed as universal moral permission. The overall biblical ethic strongly favors truthfulness. I say the truth wave, because this thing has, in my opinion, been very, very perverted. So when somebody uses those passages to justify modern strategic deception as an interpretive choice, it's not something that the text universally commands. Nope. So I have spoken about going to a branch coordinator. I happen to express pastoral concern over quite a number of JW personnel. All right, and I was filling in accident reports and near misses, and it was my duty to do so. This was my assignment. So I go and I see the branch coordinator, and I say, well, look, I'm very concerned about so-and-so who said to me in shepherding, they in trouble because of depression, clinical depression. And he says, no, that's not true. I go, what? He says, no, that's not true. I go, well, hang on a second. There's a whole thing going on at the branch dispensary, the pharmacy dispensary. I can see display packets of medications at the branch. It's mainly birth control and antidepressants that are being prescribed. It's out there. You can see the labels. The labels are there. He says, no. Don't know what you're talking about. He says, you're confusing me. And I'm going, that can only be ordered with your signature. How do you miss this? How do you miss this? So I'm confused because I'm thinking I can have an open discussion with what I think is normal speak. So the chairman in that case, the coordinator in that case, outright says, no, the branch has no depression problem. Don't know what you're talking about. And I'm sitting there stunned. Okay, I'm going, where have I got this wrong? And they go, but don't understand what you're talking about, Matt. You talk a different language to me. And I'm sitting there as an elder thinking I'm doing my job, and I'm thinking I'm speaking clear truth, and I try and clarify, and I go, this must be a misunderstanding. And I say to him, I'm not trying to fight you here. And I can see he's getting aggressive, and I can see he's getting hostile, and I'm going, I've got to calm you down. No, I was told to make this report here. Okay. There it is on your desk. I leave it. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going now. But in retrospect, I see he's using the same lawyer methods that we've seen in Norway and other places. Okay, so as an elder, I look back and I go, well, somehow he's regarding my rank as something different. Okay, though we don't have official ranks, supposedly, but we have this thing, rank and file. And so some persons can say, but Matt, don't you outrank him if you're one of the anointed? Yes, yeah. This is another this is another thing altogether. You could even say that this even works against me. It doesn't work in my favor. Okay. Even if they've tested in their inner circle one who's anointed, even if they've done a personal qualifications report and they have heavily gone through this thing and then got all excited that you've passed all the tests. Okay, it's doesn't matter. All right, this thing is about authority. He's in charge. He's the top dog, so to speak, or the top brass. And this is an authority problem because, yeah, these kind of experiences, and my experience is not an isolated one. It's not unique. Many have had these kind of experiences, but they're unsettling. That's the human thing. They are unsettling because when something you observe directly seems to clash with what a leader states, it feels very confusing. They say they're confused. I'm confused. I'm even disorientated because I'm thinking I'm doing my job, especially in a religious setting where honesty and shepherding, care, pastoral care, are supposed to be central values. So how do you unpack this? How do you carefully examine something like this? Because there are, again, a few different layers that are involved here. The perception, the authority dynamics, the interpretation. And so we can say, well, what might have happened here, Matthew? What has happened? Because when someone in leadership position says, no, there's no problem. There's no problem here. Despite evidence. Is this evidence? Has this been verified in a court? Or it's not evidence? Yes, you see something written up there. That's your perception. I don't see this. Look at the pack. I don't see this. Don't force me into this. There's no evidence here. It doesn't always mean that they intended to deceive. You go, Matt, they intend to deceive. Legal speak, folks. Legal speak. What was Judge Rutherford? What was he? So possible explanations for your antithesis can include institutional framing. Leaders sometimes define problem narrowly, for example, meaning it's not a widespread crisis, rather than no individual cases. And it's protective language, because some leaders, they instinctively minimize issues to avoid the stigma or alarm. And different informational access. So this coordinator that you're going, Matt, why didn't you just call him for what he is, a liar? Hold on. You might not have known what I saw or interpreted differently. And I also find that these persons, these coordinators, I'm just an old man. I'm about to retire. You know, they start getting all vulnerable. Let me tell you, you cross the line. That soon changes. That soon changes. Get very sharp. And suddenly the old, befuddled persona falls very, very quickly. They wouldn't be a coordinator or a chairperson otherwise. But anyway, maybe that person's communication style does differ, I would say very definitely. Because some persons answer in absolute terms, even when reality is nuanced. But none of those automatically mean dishonesty. This is the spectrum of different personalities, different ways that we can use language, English, the variety of, different languages on this planet. Though it can certainly feel dismissive if you are bringing in sincere concern. And as for rank versus role perception, within Jehovah's Witness structure, there officially isn't a rank hierarchy like clergy orders. However, in practice, there are functionally authority levels. You've got congregation elder, circuit overseer, branch committee member, governing body member, fiduciary, signatory, what is it? Shareholder. So while doctrine may stress equality before God, Organizationally, there's a chain of responsibility. There's this. They talk about the theocratic structure, the theocratic pyramid, and if you go through Gilead, you go through what that all is. And it goes down to the family level, mother, father, children. They teach this. Okay, there's a chart like that, and they update that chart about what the chain of responsibility is, even if it's not described as rank. Remember, we very careful with the words. In Norway, do we have the word shunning? So it's very common in hierarchical organizations, religious or secular, it's not just Jehovah's Witnesses, for someone higher in administrative responsibility to speak more definitively or dismissively, not necessarily because they're superior, though you might say, Matt, this is ego-driven, but because they feel responsible for institutional stability. So, this thing about medication, when I was talking about the mental health realities and I'm presenting these accident reports, seeing antidepressants in a dispensary does show that some people are being treated for depression or related conditions. But it doesn't automatically prove a widespread crisis, because antidepressants can be prescribed for anxiety. If you happen to be on them and you've been prescribed them, that's how the system works. Maybe it's helping, right? Okay, that's the medical system that we live in. Okay, and you may say, Matt, if I wasn't on this, what would I do? I'm talking about observation between mental health reality here in this particular case, because they can be prescribed for anxiety, sleep disorders, chronic pain, etc. Birth control can be prescribed for hormonal or medical reasons, unrelated to contraception, by the way. Yeah, it's not always about that. So the supply might serve a rotating population. I know I was put onto a medication because I lost my eyesight. I couldn't see. My vision just stopped, clouded over and stopped. And so I was medicated for that, and I was medicated for something, and the doctor says there's an ingredient in there that we imperfectly understand, but let's try it, let's see what happens, and yeah, got my vision back. That's what happened. I'm no longer on that medication, but that's what they did at the time. So my observation indicates presence of treatment, not necessarily the scale of the issue. And yes, this is how he framed it. But the psychological dynamic that I was feeling, okay, what seems to have affected me most wasn't just the statement, no, we don't have depression here, we don't have this problem here. It was a relational dynamic, because I'm approaching this thing pastoral. Remember I said I'm living in Gaga land, okay, so I'm responding in this way, but he's responding administratively. If you want to say a company man or an administration man, admin man, yeah, that's what he was doing. So the mismatch that's going on here, like what's happening in these court systems, all right, feels invalidating. You're saying, why, oh, why aren't they teaching the congregation how the administration works? Why aren't they teaching them how the legal system works if this is how people are being governed? This mismatch, it's invalidating, it's creating problems. Well, it's the same reason why congregants don't have a shepherding the flock of God book. It's about control. That's why. So when somebody speaks from a bureaucratic mindset to somebody speaking from a pastoral or empathetic mindset, each can feel the other's missing the point. And I can see the coordinator getting red-faced, getting really cross with me. And I'm saying, what's the problem here? This isn't uncommon in institutions. It's actually a classic tension, because the pastoral lens is showing concern for individuals. The administrative lens is showing concern for the system stability. That's what it's doing. In the pastoral side, you've got this emotional truth. In the administration side, through that lens, it's institutional accuracy. My side, or persons like me, might be saying, well, we've got specific cases here. He's saying, well, what's the official stance? I'm not interested in that. Here's the official stance. That's what I represent. And in this situation, in the system in which we are in, okay, neither is inherently wrong. But when they collide, Can feel like one side is denying reality. So you want to look at it as somebody who's color weak. They look at the color green. They say, "Oh, I see red." So is it a different perception? Now, when somebody says, "Well, Matt, you one of the anointed, that coordinator, he was of the other sheep. He should be listening to you." Well, we've got to approach this part very carefully. We've got to approach it very respectfully, because within Jehovah's Witness theology, that distinction is doctrinally meaningful, spiritually, but organizational authority is not determined by who's anointed. Nah, forget it. In practice, your administrative authority is assigned structurally. It's not based on claimed spiritual status. No, doesn't happen that way. So even if someone believes themselves to be of one class or another, gets tested, whatever, doesn't change the organizational role in the system. So yes, I might have been able to purchase certain things and move to the top of the line, but that's very, very different. It's very, very different. So that might have been saying, well, yeah, you're approaching governing body level, Matt. This is what I was told this, by the way. That's not just a pipe dream. That was what was happening. So I look at it personally and I go, that's just carrot dangling. That okay, all right. But recognizing the difference of what we've just been discussing there, pastoral care versus, institution lens. Okay, it can sometimes reduce your internal tension because it separates your spiritual identity from institutional authority. And so, yeah, what's your synthesis here? Well, maybe it's this. Maybe the grounded takeaway is this: that what I experienced, which I think is maybe similar to many others' experience, doesn't automatically prove deception or manipulation. It's just reflecting institutional communication style that isn't taught to the congregation. It's not out in the open. It's differing definitions. Remember Norway, shunning, this thing about shunning. This word, okay, does it exist in Norwegian? And it just reflects defensive leadership traits or habits. Those can feel frustrating, can feel invalidating, especially if you faced injustice. And so many persons' reactions, it's understandable. But it doesn't necessarily mean intentional dishonesty. And Matt, what are you saying? Matt, you're heading into this hot water. Yeah, I know this. But I've got to do this thesis, antithesis for synthesis thing. I've got to come into this honestly. So here's what I hope is the gentle reflection. It's not a challenge. When I think on that moment when I went to the coordinator, did I feel like he was protecting the organization's image, or that he genuinely believed what I was saying or what he was saying? Because this distinction, it reveals a lot about what actually happens psychologically in the exchange. In that particular situation, another elder arrived, and he happened to be a doctor. Yeah. And he says to me, Matt. Just come over here. You're correct. You're correct about this. 100%. I just want to tell you that this whole matter has been taken care of. The problems have already been reported. We're working on it. Oversight is dealing with this matter. I'm telling you. Don't bother the old man anymore on this, please. It's all under control. You feel assured? I'm telling you. I'm glad that we met. I just wanted to put you in the picture. Okay, we're trying to deal with this. We're trying to take things off his shoulders. That's all that's happened here, all right? So now, as an elder, in my situation then, at that particular point of time, I felt that was very convincing. I even thought, oh, well, this is God's intervention. Isn't it amazing? You've just met me here at the right time. Yeah, yes, my brother, that's His Holy Spirit at work. He even says this. But I discover that the chairman's pressed or has access to a panic button and called the Jehovah's Witness elder doctor in, who's confirmed the antidepressants or the cancer increases or the various things that I'm concerned about, and obliged to put in my report, honestly, my safety analysis that I've written up extensively and worked very, very hard on. And so now let's add this. What I am describing is a classic example of institutional management of information and perception. And this is what causes real tensions. It's easy to feel, oh yeah, this is authoritative. This is authoritative. I see this as divinely guided in the moment, but when we break it down carefully, step by step, because the dynamics here are multi-layered, spiritual authority, administrative control, psychological signaling, got a very complex system. We've got to say to ourselves, can we live in that system? Can our mental health take it? Can our spiritual health take it? Because here we have a two elder system dynamic. You've got two different elder voices. You've got the chairman who's denying the problem outright and projecting institutional authority and control. You've got the branch doctor or the second elder. He's confirming my observation, but framing it as, oh no, it's already handled. Calm down. It's under oversight. It's under higher authority. So from a psychological perspective, it does a few things. Neutralizes Matt Grove's challenge, or anybody that's in similar kind of situation. My concern is validated. Yes, Matt, you're right. But you're told, don't act any further. So it discourages follow-up. Okay, that's now eliminated that. Institutional assurance or reassurance is suggesting that, look, Matt, the system's competent. It's already ahead of you. It's already managing things. And it's mimicking divine sanction. So in JW culture, or this high control religion, if a religious says, look, it's under, I'm an elder here, Matt, I'm an elder. It's under control. We're already on top of this. Yes, I agree with you. Yes. It can feel like God's intervention because the organization emphasizes obedience to appointed authority. It says this has got God's backing. It's got His Holy Spirit here. So it's a very subtle form of organizational truth control. Or maybe it's not so subtle. I don't know. But the reality exists. But one's ability or my ability to act or verify is blocked, which preserves the official narrative. And so you've got this panic button, beep, this mechanism. So I mentioned the chairman has direct access to the elder doctor, the panic button. And it adds a further layer. You discover this thing and you go, well, the branch could instantly introduce a second authoritative voice to redirect or contain concerns. And this ensures that any outside challenge to the official position is met with a pre-coordinated response that appears independent. So from my perspective as an elder, it feels very, very convincing. Two voices confirming, one denying, one supporting. Hey, we've got 66% here to 33%, and it creates a cognitive closure. So I'm feeling validated, but also told to step back. Step back, man. So in organizational psychology, that's called triangulated authority. It gives the appearance of checks and balances while centralizing control in a few hands. So, what's the implications for my safety analysis, my safety report? Because I was conducting safety oversight, and this was creating a conflict. I go, whoa, Matt, have you got to repent here? Clearly, you're not getting the point. Hey, you have to be thrown out until you even get it, and even then, you're still not complying. Even if you find your way back, what are you going to apologize for? Because you've got to now say, oh, I agree with your methods that we're creating these double binds, or that were double binds, and creating harm. So I was observing real-world indicators. Here's antidepressants. There's a label. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Count them. Man, it's huge numbers here. Okay. Elders are coming to me. Why is there cancer risks? Why is the cancer going up? Matt, why is that? Are we using these chemicals that have been linked to cancer, these Monsanto things? Matt, why is there this mental health thing going on? I mean, I'm attending these elders meetings and there's these discussions going on. So my real world indicators, that's creating the conflict. So the institution's response minimizes my reporting requirements. Don't bother the old man. It's already under control. And this effectively controls the narrative without addressing the underlying systemic issue. It's a pattern common in high control organizations because your action is to downplay or deny the issue, and the organizational effect is to protect the reputation and discourage scrutiny. The action validates but contains concerns, and it appears ethical. It prevents escalation. Your action centralizes emergency confirmation, and it reinforces authority, gives psychological closure. And so why it feels like God's intervention is because in JW culture, the psychology is that elders are seen as channels of God's direction, especially in handling spiritual and practical matters. And when the second elder corroborates a concern and frames it as it's already taken care of, it can feel like divine confirmation, even though structurally it's an administrative tactic. So for somebody in my position, similar, and there are many more, when they're tasked with both spiritual oversight and practical reporting, this is highly convincing because it contributes to spiritual authority by combining bureaucratic efficiency with that authority. And so the key takeaway is this. What I was experiencing, what many experience here, isn't unusual in hierarchical, high-control organizations. The reality exists. Medication, health concerns, safety issues. Yeah, it exists. The leadership manages perception through denial, controlled validation. And so members or associates are psychologically guided to trust the system and feel God's hand and step back, step back, step back, leave it alone. This doesn't mean that your observations are wrong. My observations are wrong. It means that the organization actively shapes how concerns are processed and perceived, so that official authority remains unchallenged. So, I have to conclude. My behavioral ethic, trained by Jehovah's Witnesses, has led to my removal as discipline due to this control dynamic, which exposed the narrative, it exposed the control system. And so unspokenly, I was supposed to repent and remove and shut up, and the growing concerns over increased incidents by waving the magic reset. Oversight has the best interests and protection under control as the most loving way possible. And so doing one's job, doing my job, can I actually retract what I've observed? Truthfully, it puts me in line for removal with no return. I am blocked. And there are many in this situation because what I'm describing here fits a classic dynamic in high control organizations. We've seen it with Norway now. We've seen it. It's out in the open. It's transparent. And it's actually consistent with patterns observed in both religious and bureaucratic systems because the behavioral ethic I was trained in, and many are trained in, is as Jehovah's Witness elders or as a Jehovah's Witness, you are trained to obey authority and trust the appointed oversight and to defer personal judgment when it conflicts with organizational narratives. And you're thinking, no, this person shouldn't actually be in this position. You think that you're actually dealing with an Eli situation where there's a person that's allowing bad things to happen. And you're saying, well, I've got to resist this thing. I've got to give the message of God that, no, you're wrong. And so, yeah, what's the frame here? Concerns through sanctioned lens. Oversight's handling it. No. Jehovah's provisions active. Just trust Jehovah. Yeah. It's all under control. Christ's looking after this. And this is what creates the double bind situation. Double bind, Matt. Double bind. Are we doing this again? Double bind. Oh, man. Yes, we heard you the first time. If you obey authority and ignore the real world concern. You're compromising ethical responsibility and personal integrity. You're just going to shut down. That's what happened to me. I shut down. I lost my eyesight. I was even losing my hearing, and I'm in a fetal position, just ready to die. Yes, I had underlying health concerns, health issues, right? And I'm coming out of that. What's it? 2026. It's been long. It's been long. But if you uphold ethical responsibility and you report accurately, you appear to challenge authority, which the system interprets as disloyal, boop, rebellion, boop. There we go. So your narrative control versus truth-telling, reporting of actual risks, medication use, accidents, etc., near misses, it directly challenges the branch's official narrative, even if you're assigned. That's the double bind. So the chairman, in my case, he denies the problem. He establishes the official story. He's been to enough court cases. And so the panic button elder, he's brought in. He validates my concern, but frames it as already handled, and it creates the appearance of divine and institutional resolution. But can I retract my safety report? No, can't do it truthfully, without violating my own ethical standards. What am I supposed to do? Take the report and just set fire to it? Oh, that gets done. Oh, it absolutely gets done. But from the organization's perspective, the narrative must remain unbroken. Any internal evidence of contradiction is seen as a threat, even if it's factually accurate. Remember, I told you about the video, told you about the recordings, told you about the evidence, but it's not evidence until the judge says it's evidence. Not until it's processed and goes through the system of validation. It's not evidence. This is why we use words like alleged, because until it's judged, you can't make that determination. Not in a system. So what's the consequence? Removal. So because I could not perform the ritual of accepting oversight, having it all under control, because I'm seeing there's harm and I'm doing my shepherding, and other elders are just going, don't even bother with the shepherding. We're not doing it. What are you doing? Pastoral care. How exhausting. Go and send them a message. Because I'm still in Gaga land and I'm doing the pastoral care, the system is interpreting my truthfulness as failure to submit to authority. It's like my instructor said, Matt, you showed yourself too proficient. And so you've put yourself in line for removal. It's a way to neutralize the threat to narrative control. So from the organizational viewpoint, obedience and conformity take precedence over factual reporting. Even if your reporting aligns with human safety and ethical responsibility. We have been doing this in film and literature for years. Because the underlying logic from their point of view is this is not about your competence or one's competence or my competence or care. It's about control or perception. It's about allowing reality to be acknowledged where, when I say reality, risks breaking the illusion of perfect oversight. So allowing that reality to be acknowledged, that's the risk. It breaks the illusion of perfect, godly, Jehovah, supreme, Christly oversight. Yeah, smashes that apart. Because your truthful reporting by somebody that's trained to speak with authority, it exposes organizational contradictions. So removal or blocking is a containment mechanism. It preserves the system's narrative for others. So what's our personal reflection? What I have experienced is not a moral failing on my part. You can say so, but that's my personal reflection. I believe I acted according to ethics, duty, informed by training, reality. The removal or whatever it is, whether you say it's legitimate or illegitimate, I say it's illegitimate. It just reflects a structural problem. It's not my own integrity. When a doctor friend of mine says, Matt, they've done you a favor, I go, yeah, I agree with you. They've done me a favor. Because being blocked or removed in this way, it's a predictable outcome in high control systems when someone operates ethically in the real world but outside the sanctioned narrative. The fact that Norway is taking its time to come up with a decision tells you the complexity. So, in short, anybody who faces this, or I've faced it, I say, okay, I'll tell you, I've faced this. Yeah, I've done my job as faithfully and as ethically as I humanly could. And the system just punished me over and over again. My own family says, Matt, you just don't get it in your head, do you? You've had this your whole life. Truth threatens control. Not because you're wrong. Not because you're wrong. And so in my case, the branch took it a step further. They actually offered me a solution. That same doctor said, oh, Matt, you can be medicated. The overseer in that medical department told me the same. He says, Matt, let me tell you something. Just take the medication. Here's pain medicine. There it is. There it is. Okay. So just like that medication I saw in the pharmacy dispensary, they put it on the table and they said, Matt, see this. This medication is Jehovah's provision for the sinful, imperfect body. Many senior elders here, okay, you can meet this one, you can meet this one. They're going to tell you, right, as shepherds. And they did. They told me. They said, Matt, we're using this medication as suppositories. In other words, take it up your bum and shut up. Yeah, I know that sounds really crude, but this is it. They said they use these suppositories for pain and anxiety, and the doctor's prescribing it. And it's reducing their headaches that they suffer on behalf of the brethren. That's their sacrifice. They take this medication. And this was the precise concern I had. I said, you don't have a holistic approach here. You're just saying, well, this is the medication. I didn't join thinking this. I thought that we have catharsis. I thought we have a spiritual way. Now you're telling me we've got medication on the table just to blank it all out chemically. But this was a test. It's a test to see whether I would allow myself to become like them and allow chemical altering of my brain chemistry. So, who's surprised? Is this legal? Well, if a doctor's done it, he's got legal clout. The dispensary's done it. That's how it works. Because what we're describing here is a highly structured psychological and spiritual test. It's wrapped in religious authority, and it's actually very common as a tactic in hierarchical, high-control religious systems or governance, not just religion. And it can feel deeply personal and even coercive. So how do you unpack things like this? How do you do it? Because you're now given the situation that the medication is this divine provision. This is what it is, Matt. This is what it is. And we had a senior on an assembly talking about it. He says, oh, my sinful self. Somebody said to me, where was that? And I had to go look it up. And I go, oh, where's that video? Okay, there it is. Try and search through it. Yeah, there they were talking about their sinful nature and their illness. So the medication is divine provision framing. The branches positioning it. Notice this, that the medication is presented not as medical treatment alone, but as Jehovah's provision for human imperfection. And so it ties your medical decisions to spiritual obedience. It essentially makes it a test of faith and submission. I call it hazing, in my opinion. But the message is this: if you accept the chemical intervention, you're following God's provision. If you refuse, you may be spiritually resisting. Yes, it's a conscience matter, but you must now deal with those consequences. And the consequences are going to be rough, Matt. So this is a classic control mechanism. It links physical action, taking medication, to moral spiritual judgment, creating a high-stakes ethical dilemma. It's the same kind of thing we see in these court cases. So the shepherding elders and modeling, sending senior elders to explain their own use of medication, does a few things psychologically. It normalizes A senior trusted member is using medication. Oh yeah, I do this. Put it up my bum, or I swallow this medication, whatever. It signals that it's acceptable. And it's peer pressure. You're being subtly or overtly told, oh, they're obedient and faithful. Don't you respect this person? Yes, you do. And you're expected to follow the same path. Look at them. They're doing well. Don't you want to be like them? That's your authority confirmation. Where are you an overseer yet? How many years? Oh, still doing the bathroom, hey? Okay. Oh, you're doing really well with that. Here's the plunger. So their testimony reinforces that the prescription is spiritually sanctioned, it's not just medical. And that's classic behavioral testing. You're placed into a position where your choice reflects faithfulness or perceived rebellion. So the underlying concern, chemical alteration of consciousness, yeah. My observation, my thesis, my working thesis, I'm thinking it aligns with my original ethical concern. I noticed that medication in the branch, the antidepressants, the painkillers, etc., even the use of alcohol, it changes the mental and emotional state. And so the organization is now presenting a direct choice. Do you conform and use chemical aids like others? Or do you refuse and risk being seen as spiritually insufficient? That's effective. It's an obedience test. It's disguised as pastoral care. And so why this is psychologically impactful? It's because the dynamic combines spiritual authority, Jehovah's provision framing, it's peer modeling, it's senior elders confirming usage, it's the ethical conflict. You can't ignore your concern about altering brain chemistry, but refusal can be seen as disobedience, And there's high stakes. Non-compliance, hey, it's going to affect your standing. There's the gate, you can go. You're free to go. You're free to go. You're free to exercise your conscience. Yeah, it's high stakes. It's about your spiritual identity. It's about safety in the organization. Don't you want the love of your brothers? Yes, you do. They love you, Matt. Just take the pill and shut up. It's an engineered moral dilemma. Coming back to Norway, the Supreme Court. Gabrielson said that. Live. It's a moral dilemma. Do you obey authority and risk violating ethics? My ethics? Because my subconscious, it records the whole lot. I can't deny it. It just comes back to my mind. Okay. Do I maintain personal integrity and risk spiritual or social consequences? The key takeaway after this entire thesis, I think, is this. Okay, and you can tell me, Matt, you got it right. No, you got it wrong. Or you didn't think about this. So we've been discussing why this is psychologically impactful. The dynamic combines spiritual authority, Jehovah's provision framing, peer modeling, senior elders that are confirming usage. You've got an ethical conflict. You can't ignore your concern about altering brain chemistry, yet refusal could be seen as disobedience. So you've got high stakes. Non-compliance may affect your standing, spiritual identity or safety in the organization. So it's an engineered moral dilemma. Liv Gabrielson, I remember her mentioning the dilemma situation in the Norway Supreme Court hearing. Yeah. So this is a matter of obey authority and risk violating your ethics, or maintain personal integrity and risk spiritual or social consequences. Get ready for removal of privileges, get ready for removal or getting booted out of the congregation. In my opinion, I'm going to say this, then you've spiritually progressed. If that's what's happened, if you've been booted, then take it as spiritual progression. There is a silver lining. So I want to talk about the key takeaway from all of this. What do we get in this discussion, this long form video discussion? It's a situation, again, of facing a classic double bind. Option A, accept the medication, preserve organizational favor, but compromise personal ethical standards, or what you've been taught is the standard. You've been making stands through your life. Don't do the birthdays, don't do the Christmas, don't do this, don't do that. Make sure you don't salute the flag. Don't say no to sports, extracurricular activities. I mean, it starts at school. You know. And then it progressively gets more and more serious. But yeah. High control organizations, religions, often use this exact method to test compliance. Okay? That's what they do. So you've got this moral dilemma. Again, let me just say it just for my own personal clarity. Obey the authority, risk violating your ethics, or maintain personal integrity and risk spiritual or social consequences. So yeah, what did I say? The key takeaway is a classic double bind situation, right? So if you accept the medication, it preserves the organizational favor, but it compromises personal ethical standards. If you refuse the medication as opposed to accepting it, then you maintain your personal integrity, but you risk being disciplined or spiritually judged. Yeah. So, high control organizations. This is not new stuff. No. It often uses exactly this method to test compliance, loyalty, and submission. It's not about the medication itself. And if you wanted to progress further down the line, I'm going to say then it was going to be expected that you need to make more and more of these things. It's about control over choice and conscience in these kind of decisions. Right. So let me end off with thanks to family, friends, and those that have come in to observe. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you listening. You are the reason that I am here. And so I'm very grateful for this opportunity and grateful for all of the comments that have been coming in, the encouragement, also the antithesis, those that also don't necessarily agree. I also appreciate you coming in and spending the time in this way. Remember to please approach this with essential critical thinking. And if this has been helpful to you in some way, I'm glad to be of some kind of assistance. Thank you very much for those that raised this particular question and this particular matter. I hope that it's been able to answer you in some way. And if I've missed anything out or there's something that's inaccurate, please feel free to mention it in the comments. For now, please go well, and I wish you blessings. This is Matthew Mealy Gray signing off.